Hello everyone and welcome to another patch notes breakdown. This time around it's 8.23 and I'm joined by Peter Counterfeit Hartnell, the lovely guy on, well, not exactly on top of me, but he's on top of my webcam.
Gosh, that was quite the introduction, Jesper. I don't know if I could really follow up to anything like that with anything appropriate for the internet. But I'm happy to be here today. I'm excited to wake up early and do reading of patch notes with you.
Yeah, it couldn't be better. Reading patch notes and being with me, especially early in the morning. So, Counterfeit, instead of us continuing on with this very weird introduction, let's just jump straight down to champions. So obviously this is it the pre? I think it's the preseason patch, right?
Yes.
Yes. So some things have been changed. A lot of not a lot of champions have been changed, but runes and bounties and turrets in general is the thing that has been changed. But
Yes.
let's start out with Aatrox. So his art duration has been decreased and now always grants max health, max heal if Bloodwell is over 80% filled.
So
Yeah.
this is something that enraged a mutual friend of ours because he didn't quite understand what was going on here. Uh, so it's a little counterintuitive, this change, in that you no longer are getting the full heal from getting it to the full amount.
Mm-hmm.
Because the patch notes aren't phrased in the most easy to understand way. But what this is doing is it's giving Aatrox a bigger window of opportunity where he'll get a larger quantity of his health back. So it used to be if you hit 80% Bloodwell, you would get 40% max health. I did the maths yesterday. But now there's a window of time between 80% and 100 that you'll get the 50% max health back. So it just means that even though the World Ender itself is shorter, there is I don't know if it's a larger proportion, but at least of the 10 seconds compared to 12 seconds, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
There's, you're going to get a decent chunk of health back in the last, fifth. So the last couple of seconds, rather than being, theoretically you get killed right at the end of the World Ender and you get back slightly more health. But
Mm-hmm.
in this case, you get a bigger chunk earlier. It's more consistent.
Yeah. So it's less of like a rework where you pop it early on because you think you might die, but you pop it because you know you're probably going to die in this space of seconds.
Well, I mean that is a good point in that the shaving 2 seconds off the duration means that the passive movement speed you get from it, it means it's less good as an
Oh
engage,
yeah.
it's more likely to run out. And it makes it easier to play around because it's easier to just wait out the slot. I mean, we've seen it a lot in stuff like Mitre Shaft that people will
Yeah.
just, if they can, they'll just, they'll wait for his cooldowns to go. And if they realize that they survived his cooldowns, then there isn't actually that much of a compelling reason to kill him anymore. Because he's not doing anything really.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a little less good to use as an engage, or I guess a partial engage. So I don't know. I kind of feel like the normal use cases it will be slightly better because you've got more chance to get back with more health. But in competitive, I think it might be a little bit worse.
Yeah, it might be. I see the point you're making. There's more you want to add to Aatrox, or do you want to jump to Israel?
No, I think that's all I can think of.
Okay, yeah, I don't see a lot more to add to Aatrox. I think you hit the nail on his head at that. Basically, when his abilities are down, it doesn't really matter that much for him because he's going to get his health back anyways if he dies. So, and he gets
Yeah.
a larger chunk of health back. And I think the only point I really have to make about it is that I see it now being used less as, again, as I said, less of a tool you know because you think you might die, but a tool you use because you know you're 100% going to die. So you want to proc it early on because you have less of duration on it now.
Yeah, I think it's more forgiving to someone who pops it during a fight.
Yeah.
Get back more health earlier.
Okay, so Ezreal, W based.
Oh,
Go-
sorry, I was trying to be enthusiastic.
Well, I'm happy that you're being enthusiastic, especially when it's early in the morning, Counterfeit. So, W base damage increased. AP radio now scales with rank. R damage decreased against minions and non-epic monsters, but no longer falls off per target hit. I really think the True Shot Barrage changes are interesting because it now means that he shoves more damage towards champions who are hit in if he likes wave clears out on the side lanes or if he hits a champion through minions, which I really like because the ability should be about killing champions. I think that's like the ultimate goal for ultimates, that they should be about killing champions and not about losing damage whenever minions or non-champions are hit.
Well, yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like the notes, the kind of like explanatory section of the notes, it does go into it relatively well,
Mm-hmm.
which is that, the W changes is to try and push AP Ezreal, which, again, I'm not sure, I don't know if I've talked to you about this before, specifically, but it's one of the few champions that they still seem to be okay with the idea of having a different kinds of builds on, and I don't know, like, speaking as someone who used to play AD Malzahar, I can sort of understand this, because it did something functionally different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're trying to go for that here, because, yeah, Essence Flux is more rewarding to power level, because it gives you more raw damage, and has better AP scaling as it goes. So I don't know, I kind of feel like if you want to have, whatever the AP Ezreal is, which is, I guess, more just like a sort of a champion who revolves heavily around the Essence Flux, I kind of feel like you just make that kind of champion into a new champion, and then just have that be its own thing, rather than trying to make basically almost two variants of the same champion work in the same shell.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think that's a good point, especially considering how the new Essence Flux works. Because you still need to proc it some way, right? By an auto attack or your Q.
Yes.
So like it gets much harder to use that Essence Flux out of nowhere suddenly. And then like it does seem much harder to play that AP Ezreal. And I don't think what like getting 15 extra damage on your level 5 Essence Flux is actually going to justify that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as the True Shot Barrage one, yeah, you're right. It's a much, much better tool for assassinating people, because you're not gonna get excuse me. You're not gonna have your damage like torn away by it just happening to hit a minion on the way there. But it also has got quite a lot less wave clear.
Yeah.
So it's not. I mean, I don't know how important it was that you could
But-
wave clear with it, but
Hey Peter, now if you're building AP, at least you're still going to wave clear. Because
No,
you're
that's
building AP Ezreal, but then that's all you're gonna do because you can't hit your Essence Flux through anything,
Well,
really.
as a small extra note on that, just when we talking about the AP True Shot Barrage,
Mhm.
is that even though minions and non-epic monsters now take 50% reduced damage,
Yeah.
you are not losing damage off of hitting the first minion. So if you're hitting in terms of in the old one, if you hit a minion wave, you would lose 10% damage for each enemy you hit.
Yeah.
So if you hit a wave of greater than 5, you'd still be losing 50% on the following ones anyway. So for a bigger minion wave, it might actually be slightly better, but yeah. But as I say, it's also team fight. It's actually like not going to have insignificant damage anymore,
Yeah.
which is nice.
Definitely nice and a good way of cleaning up Israel. But then Lissandra, she has a new passive, and we'll dive into that later on. Well, after we read through. Her mana regen growth has been increased. Her Q and W cost has been decreased. Her W damage decreased, and short E dashes are faster, and her ult ratio decreased as well. So basically, a lot of changes for Lissandra, and her passive is very interesting. Do you have some thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think we kind of got to cover the old passive in case anyone doesn't know what that does,
Mm-hmm.
which just gives you a free spell cast every now and again, which is very, very boring. I think the intention is to kind of cover for that somewhat. So the mana regen growth doubling just gives her more mana,
Mm-hmm.
and also she's got mana reduction on I think most of her primary abilities, Ice Shard and Ring of Frost.
Yeah.
So I think that's presumably going to be.
And I think also like the bonus attack speed means that she's going to have an easier time getting CS in the early game as well, because you probably usually used your Q to get those last hits. It's like getting a
Yes.
little bit of extra attack speed is just a feel nice bonus.
Yeah, and she's also got a slightly faster attack animation as well,
Oh yeah.
which is I don't know how much of a difference that makes, but I assume it's enough for them to bother changing it.
Yeah, I think it makes a big change because have you ever played Nivea, Peter?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, she has a very low missile speed, right? So I think having a higher missile speed means that it's somewhat easier to CS.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you're right that that's there to make it easier for us to do CSing.
Anyways, her passive, Counterfeit, is now that whenever a person dies near Lysandra, they become a frozen thrall. Like, that means that basically they become what, like, a siren passive.
Yes,
For just
I think
the
that's
4
the closest
seconds.
approximation.
Yeah, and then that means that I don't know if she's able to control them or if they'll seek out enemies on their own, but at least they'll like become a siren, they'll slow the enemies, and then they'll deal damage based on base damage and AP ratio.
I don't think she can control them just because of the way it's. Firstly, it's a passive, so she doesn't have a. There's no like mechanic in the node to suggest that she has a way of controlling them in terms of they don't follow. Her, they're not like prioritizing her auto attack target. And it's not like if it was like Tibbers, like her ultimate, you'd be able to press R to redirect them. Because it's a passive, there's no button, so I don't think they. I think it just chases the nearest one. So I don't know. It seems like it's any passive which involves getting a kill feels like it's a passive you won't necessarily see for a decent chunk of the game.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess that's also like if we assume that her old passive is folded into her mana regen being higher and her costs being lower, then you also don't see her old passive for the entirety of the game. So I guess it's a net move forward.
Yeah, it's a bit better. I really like the change though. I think that at least in like team fights where Lysandra's identity lies, it makes a big change because now she has an even bigger impact in team fights. Because prior to her new passive, she kind of fell off after the late mid game, but now she has a bit more of an impact because she has extra damage coming from her passive.
Yeah, you're right. It definitely does feel like a later game passive. It's worth noting that it's got a AP power ratio, you said, but as part of the consequence of that, her Ring of Frost and her ultimate both have actually lost out on their AP ratio a bit. So, she's. So I'm going to repeat some of the things which I've heard from when LS was talking about this because, it makes sense. But yeah, it sharpens her down as more of a utility mage because her AP scalings are not so good.
Yeah. Well, I think that makes sense because her identity is to be like an utility mage, right? And then now with this, it kind of I wouldn't say it evens up, but at least it makes it better for her to be able to fight in the late game because she still has damage, while she still has that utility.
Yeah, well, I think if you can get one of these thralls off, then she's in a pretty good spot. Especially, something else to consider as well is like, so firstly, well, to restate what hopefully is relatively obvious, is that one of Lysandra's strengths is her ability to never die. So if you're in the middle of a team fight, you've got your Frozen Tomb, you've got your Zhonya's. The Iceborne Subjugation, the passive, doesn't require an enemy to be killed by Lysandra. It just requires them to die. So if you're in a team fight that's going moderately evenly, you could potentially just rock up into the middle of the opposing team, sit there invincible for a while, and let your team work around you, get a kill, and then you've got a thrall to then provide this substantial slow.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I just came up with it now. I'm quite impressed with myself.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to seeing how Lysandra will fare in this patch. Let's jump onto Talia. So, Talia, Q cooldown cost, workaround duration decreased, Q multi-hit damage penalty now applies to everything, not just champions. So basically, as far as I've thought about this, she's back to like her old self. But she still has what like the AOE reduce. Oh yeah, no. She has the multi-hit damage. I'm not a fan of that because prior to her being turned into what jungler, she used to have fall of damage per stone being hit, right? And now everything from what like takes 50% reduced damage from stone shot beyond the first. So it doesn't have that ramp up time anymore on individual targets. So she's back to her old self without the ramp up target or ramp up time.
I don't think I can probably remember older Talia as well as you can, but I mean, there's a small trade-off in that it's got less of a cooldown, and it also costs less. But yeah, it feels like that's probably a fairly substantial hit to her jungle clear. Though at the same time, the worked ground duration going from 120 to 45 seconds means that presumably, I don't know how much of an issue it was because I'm not a big Talia player, but I presume it means that if you're going for the jungle, you're not having to avoid stepping on worked ground as much, because presumably if you clear, then by the time you come back, it's gone again, as opposed to presumably before where it would remain in place. I don't know, maybe people could still work around it, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right. That now work ground isn't that big of a problem anymore in the jungle. I'm just not a big fan of the multi-hit damage penalty. It feels like it feels very counterintuitive to have an ability that shoots out multiple stones, where multiple stones do like less damage because it's just beyond the first one.
Well, I would also say that it's a fairly substantial cooldown reduction. Like you're going from, I mean, it's a little bit of a stretch here, but you're taking 4 seconds off the cooldown of the ability. So what you're being reduced. Sorry, I can't do maths so early in the morning. Even easy. Like what, a third off the cooldown, and then you're taking
basically a third.
If you see that she does say 10 damage with each multi-hit, just for the sake of argument, then she would have done 30 before, and now she's gonna do 20 because so you get
you get two-thirds of the damage of it.
Yeah, so if we work those numbers and say she's gonna do 2/3 of the damage, but she's now also got 2/3 of the cooldown, then doesn't it kind of work out more or less the same?
Yeah, it kind of does, but it just all falls in the favor of the jungle Talia, I guess, because you don't see a lot of the mid lane Talia, and without you having a lot of wave clear and having still the multi-hit damage penalty on you, it just doesn't really work out for the mid lane Talia.
I would say that I'd imagine the workaround duration probably is a lot more applicable to mid lane than it would be to jungle, just because in the jungle you're moving around a lot, whereas in mid lane you're not. So the workaround being a lot shorter probably comes to play in mid lane a lot more than it would in the jungle. But
yeah,
I don't know.
That's
I
the
think
point.
It's probably, at least in the context of a given trade, I would say it's probably worse, but I think maybe it's relatively power neutral in an extended engagement.
Good point. Do you have anything to add about York, or can we skip that guy because that's just a bug fix?
I think that probably makes him worse. I didn't realize that there was basically, it looked like there was not quite an exploit, but like a bug which meant that you could let your Mistwalkers and Maiden like tower dive someone effectively without it drawing aggro. That seems like I didn't realize that was a thing, but if that was a thing, that was probably quite good. So I imagine that's going to see a hit to anybody who was good enough with Yorick to know that that was anything they could abuse.
Yeah,
but
like the problem was that the Maiden and the Mistwalkers, they didn't draw the aggro, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
But now they do.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense because that's the whole like idea about the champions that has like these small minions. The same goes for Heimerdinger. Heimerdinger's turrets also draw aggro whenever he places them.
Yeah, I think most things do now, but I think that might have just been a bit of an oversight that it didn't. I think a lot of time you'd be using the Morning Mist, the little AoE thing he has, to direct your ghouls.
To Mistwalkers, yeah?
I don't know if the Mistwalker's his ultimate.
Oh wait, is
So
it? No, the maiden is his. I think
oh
the
wait,
ghouls
yes,
are the
no,
Mist
sorry,
Walker.
you're right.
Yeah.
So Mistwalkers are his ghouls, and Maiden the Mist. So yeah, Mistwalkers would be directed by the AOE, which would normally
Yeah.
draw tower aggro anyway. But I guess maybe there was ways to get the minions to go after them. I don't know. Like I guess it sounds like it would just straight make him worse.
Hmm.
So.
Nice sound, Peter. Let's jump on to items because I know we both have a lot to say about this. Before we jump to the real spicy thing, let's talk about Dorn's shield. So passive regen now based on missing health.
Hmm.
So basically, it's more of an item that says, okay, if you're let's take bot lane for an example because this is where I see it very often as an AD carry main. If you're a Cockmore going up against a Caitlyn, and you know that Caitlyn will 100% poke you because she's not a bronze 5 Caitlyn, she's a challenger Caitlyn, then you want to grab the Dawn Shield because it will give you back more health when you're low. Because before, after being damaged, you got 20 health over 10 seconds. Now you get 30 health over 10 seconds based on missing health. So basically, it's not as good as an regen item early on, especially when you have a lot of health. But once you go down to missing over 25% health, then it starts to be active, to be effective.
Yes, it's. I have to admit, I've tried. I was frowning because I was looking at this and just trying to make sure I understood it correctly.
Yeah, I'm just assuming that it's a 25 health because it says capped at 25 missing health. But it's phrased in a very weird way.
Yes, I think a lot of the patch notes are a little unclear. I mean, I'm gonna trust that what they've put above the patch note is true, which means that it previously was particularly good against all-ins, and now it's not as much so.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. I don't know quite how that change applies to that. I was having a quick look up and see if I could just see because that was, I guess that's a particular interaction I wasn't aware of.
Mm-hmm. I think it's still good on all ins, but like it's just you get more health back from being low. So it like the identity of the item is that if you're being poked and pushed in a lot in your lane, then you want to go for this item instead of saying I just need to be able to sustain through my lane and have like a fixed amount of health I get back.
Yes, I'm not 100% certain why it's worse against all-ins. But I mean, because it seems to be better once you're missing some health, which I presume you will be if someone's all-inning you.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I would trust that Riot's note there is accurate, and that's just, I guess, yeah.
Well, let's hope that playtester Ender has worked the item.
I'm sure he has. He does fantastic work.
He definitely does. So, Ginster's Rage Blade, Peter. On hit flat damage increased, rage was removed. Now grants armor and magic penetration. And stacks no longer grant AD and AP, and the cost has been reduced. So, we talked a lot about this item yesterday. What's your thoughts about this?
So I think it's definitely worth reading the kind of blurb here, which is quite extensive.
Mm-hmm.
It's because they actually explain what they're kind of trying to go for here, which is trying to narrow down Quincy's Rage Blade from being kind of a must-buy on basically everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, not everybody, but like anybody who can make use of any part of it into a much more focused item, which is, so we've lost the AP and AD scaling on every part of it. So the on hit does a straight 15 magic damage rather than scaling up from the game. So 0.1%, 0.1 bonus attack damage, 0.1 ability power. I'm not quite sure what numbers it would reach, but I imagine it could potentially end up being quite a lot more than 15 over the course of the game. So that's gone. It no longer gives you multipliers for your AD and AP, so it's a lot less rewarding if you are building either of those things. In fact, it's a bit, a lot more of a waste of time if you are, compared to your other options. So Yeah, we know that's saying, Kaiser probably not going to get this one anymore. But anybody who's, I think bruisers in particular, we're discussing, anybody who doesn't build AP or AD, but does build a decent amount of attack speed, is going to still find this fairly useful, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I definitely see this item as more like an item the good old attack speed Kale would build. Because AD and AP penetration is definitely something you want as a Kale. You get on-hit magic damage, which functions well with her E. But it's just not a good item for, let's say, the Kaiser anymore. I don't think you want to build this as a Kaiser because you want attack speed. And I'm a little bit hesitant on saying whether or not someone like Wayne still wants this, because you don't get the attack speed, but armor and magic pen isn't that bad for her. Because if I remember correctly, her W is magic damage.
So I think you might have misspoken there. So the attack speed is the thing you do still get.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Let's just make sure we're correct this one, because there's a lot of things at play here. So, it doesn't grant bonus attack damage and ability power, but the stacks still grant attack speed. So I think for someone like Vayne, because it's been narrowed down to be, basically an attack speed item almost exclusively, it might still be fine. They specifically mentioned in the patch notes, and again, I don't know exactly how this works. I would have to research more to understand it. But the Infinity Edge, excuse me, Infinity Edge's true damage doesn't play particularly efficiently with armor penetration. So again, it's like there's double reason to steer away from it if you're a AD carry.
Yeah. Well, okay. So someone like Wayne actually might still use it, as you said. Basically,
if you're going on hit Vayne, yes.
Yeah, and you usually do that. I mean, like, you are focusing on your base values as an on-hit Vayne because you focus on your W. So that makes sense. Now, I'm having a hard time seeing whether or not Kaiser will still want to use it, because she wants to go for an Infinity Edge if she's going AD. And then, like, and as an AP Kaiser, there's still, like, good things you want to get.
So it's worth noting that, like with a lot of things in the patch notes, because they don't give you, so the penetration passive. I was doing a little bit of testing this to kind of get an idea of how this scales up, because it says 6.5 to 15% pen on armor and magic pen, but it doesn't tell you at what point any of that stuff happens, and it's not a linear increase. Like, I think at about a level, if memory serves, about level 11 or so, I was looking at most of that penetration already, like 11 or 12%. So I think it's a little bit better earlier.
Okay.
Than it might look.
Well, then it might actually be good for someone like Kaiser, because as an AP Kaiser, you want to have your W, and then having Magic Pen suddenly ought to make your W hit harder. But obviously, we have to test that. But just off like my train of thoughts, it might work out.
Oh, it's also worth noting that it's considered to be, and I'm just gonna have a quick check on this actually. I'm gonna load up my league. It's considered to be a Last Whisper passive. So, if I presume, and I'm 90% sure about this, that it's not going to stack with a actual Last Whisper. So that's something to think about. As far as the Kaiser point goes, I don't know. Like, I presume it's still buildable. I don't, like, in terms of it does something, but as to whether or not it actually, like, if there are maybe more efficient items to go for,
there might be, right? But as a Kaiser, it kind of still has more or less all you want. Obviously, not having the AD and AP per stack hurts, but you get attack speed, which you want as a Kaiser. If we're talking AP Kaiser, of course, you get armor and magic pen, and you get on-hit damage, so it kind of still has what you want. But I don't see, like, off the top of my head, another item an AP Kaiser could want. Maybe a Luden's Echo as your first item, but then you're not really in that 80 carry position anymore, and you kind of lose out on the attack speed and 80 damage that you want as a hybrid Kaiser.
I don't know if the oh, interesting. Just got my season rewards through. How exciting! Sorry, I got a little distracted there. I mean, it's a little difficult to say. I think in terms of, I think you might see like Nash's Tooth maybe stepping in to fulfill the same kind of function in terms of its, Nash's Tooth got some AP scaling, so it kind of covers the same sort of basis. It might be much more situational, and as well, we've also got to consider that there are going to be some champions who actually make use of the armor and magic penetration together, as in hybrid champions. Yeah, so I mean, it might be better on someone like Jax or someone if you could actually make use of that. And again, someone like Jax doesn't build up big numbers as far as AP and AD goes, so it's a little bit more or a little less disadvantage with the change.
Yeah, I think we've covered more or less all there is to Ginter's Rageblade. At least we've talked a lot about it, and people ought to have some thoughts now about how they want to use this. So let's move on to jungle items. So basically, Monster Hunter Gold penalty removed. It was the change that they made after the funnel comp was introduced, where you if you own the Hunter's Machete or Hunter's Talisman, or like the Stalker's Blade or Skirmisher Saber, you would get less gold from farming lane minions, because that was a way for them to work around the funnel comp, and now they've removed that because people have moved away from funnel comps, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, this is literally a stopgap measure put in place, and as of this patch, as we'll come to in a little bit, they've found a more permanent solution to that idea. So yeah, that's. I mean, again, I don't think it was probably really a major thing for most people, but it did stop it from being the go-to strategy for everyone. Yeah. Which I think,
it was basically something they implemented because of competitive play.
Yeah.
So, relic shield upgrades. Minion execute threshold increased for relic shields upgrades.
Oh, thank God.
Are you hating that?
No, not at all. Entirely the opposite. Like, as someone who's played Relic Shield supports, later on in the game, it's so frustrating. Like, you can tell I got a lot more enthusiastic about this particular point. Because I feel the pain of being like... So, I had this discussion with someone before. I know a while back they changed Relic Shield to have a lower execute threshold because it was too good in lane. But then I feel like they just forgot that the late game existed. And so that when you walk around with your team, you literally just, like, the proportion of the minion health that you'd be able to execute on didn't keep up with the increasing health. And in fact, it's still not the case here. It should be a percentage, but instead it's a fixed number, but with some health scaling. But those numbers don't keep up with the minions as the game goes on, so effectively it's really hard to proc, or at least it was. Hopefully it's less so now, but in the later game, you just wouldn't be able to proc it because your teammates would kill minions so much faster than you could execute them. Because, if you look at the old numbers, they are not very high. And so, unless your teammates specifically went out of their way to make sure that you could proc Relic Shield, you just couldn't, and it's incredibly frustrating. Well, I hated it in the late game. It effectively just didn't have a passive because, like, unless you're playing with pre-mates, they're not going to let you do it. Because they're like, oh, la la la, let's just clear minions as fast as possible. And you just don't get to proc it, and it's really, really annoying. You can see now that if you upgrade from Targons to the Remnant of the Aspect, why does it have two names? I'm not even sure.
I think it depends on which upgrade you go for. Because you can have, like, 2 upgrades, right?
Can you?
I'm pretty sure you can.
Let's have a quick check on that. Whoops.
But yeah, I do like these changes as well. Not that it's just like a feels good change. It's not going to change a lot, but at least it's going to make it easier for supports to keep up with the late game. But I do agree with you, Peter. I think it's a very good point about how it should be a percentage health instead of like a fixed number.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the late game, it. I really don't feel like it's a a major wave clear tool. I mean, maybe they're worried that it could be if you could say I suspect the kind of thing they want to avoid is having it be like effectively like a minion dematerializer
Mm-hmm.
times 4 for every support. Like, but I feel like there's hopefully they've arrived at something in the middle ground. But yeah, if you upgrade your target's brace, you then have which is you only do in the later game anyway. But you now have nearly half again as much room to execute minions, which hopefully is usable. But I think there are other changes, which means that this isn't going to be as impactful as I would hope it would be otherwise.
Okay. Let's move on to wards and trinkets because this is something that I'm super mad about. So, control ward inventory cap reduced. Trinket scale with average level of all champs in the game instead of owner's level. And warning totem ward duration decreased late on. And I'm super unhappy about this change. On top of another change that we'll talk about later, the turrets. I think this is a very counterintuitive change because it means that now you're getting punished by being ahead. Essentially, you can't ward up as easily because you're ahead. And I like that they want to remove the ward bot aspect of supports with the control wards, but I don't like the trinket scaling that you have to think about it being, that it's average level for all champs, because it means that if you're ahead and your opponent is very far behind, you're being punished by being ahead. That is something that makes me so mad because I don't think that should be the case.
I mean, going from what they're saying here,
they're basically saying that the winning team's vision advantage is too high. And I can see that being a problem, but I don't think this is the way for you to fix it, because I don't think you should be punished by essentially having been very good in the laning phase.
So I think what they're trying to go for here is, as it stands, like we've seen this a few times with teams we've been casting, particularly higher level teams. When they're winning, you see them come out with inventories of 3, well, I think more commonly 2, but potentially 3 control boards each. And they smother vision around objective things, so that even if if you go in and commit resources to take out the control wards, they've still got multiple other wards there to make sure they hold on to vision control. Even putting aside the edge case of throwing a ward into an auto-attacking person to try and mess them up. But I think where they're hoping to end up here is in a situation where you don't have perfect vision for a team. So you have to take slightly riskier plays, which means there's a possibility of seeing the opposing team actually catching a winning team off guard a little bit more.
Yeah, at least what they're writing in here, it's like they're saying that vision helps people close out the games in an incredibly slow way that reduces action. So they want more action, and I do think that taking objectives should always be a riskful action, but I don't think that you should be denied away the possibility of doing it in a safer way, or at least doing it in the safest way because your opponents are behind.
Well, I mean, there's also the whole trinket thing.
Yeah, exactly. Which is average level for all champs. So,
well, more specific. Well, I mean, I feel like that's probably a reasonable change in that if you're behind, I think it feels a little bit cruel that you're arbitrarily your wards just last less time than the opposing team, but because your team is behind. I feel that's a little bit unfair. But particularly the actual duration overall is going down by 60 seconds by the end of the game. So that's a much shorter duration that Woodlooking Totem is going to be out on the map. Once we start to get late game stuff around Baron and things like that.
Well, I think that the ward duration in itself is actually fine. I just don't like the change of the scaling, because I think that the way that you could have hit this change was that they want more action and they want it to be less safe. And then if you just lower the ward duration, then suddenly you have to invest more resources into taking an objective. Because essentially, what's like 3 minutes your wards used to last, and now it's 2 minutes. 3 minutes is a long time on the Summoner's Rift, where you could just place a ward, go do your stuff elsewhere, and then come back. Now 2 minutes makes you have to react faster and actually take that objective in a less safe manner. And I think that's fine, but I just don't like that. I just don't like the fact that you're being punished by being ahead, because your opponents are then behind.
Well, I mean, I've heard from a very reliable source talking to it. Well, this is one of the things I remember from being taught a little bit by Excel's John and Ferndog. That they would kind of push the idea that you push the way, you establish vision, and then if I'm getting this the right way around, and then I'm probably gonna get this wrong, so I won't go into it. But you're right. It's a smaller window of opportunity for everybody to function with, and I don't necessarily think that's a terrible thing. Like if there are several things in this patch that allow reverse snowballs somewhat. Yeah. And I think having less vision around means that I've definitely seen games where the team that's ahead has just made it impossible for the opposing team to ever make plays on them because they've got perfect vision. And I think that's kind of lame.
Well, it's lame for the average gamer's experience, but I think in a competitive manner, you should be able to play the game in such a way. Like that's the upside of being ahead, that you're able to choke out your opponent and just completely black out them.
I would disagree. It's one of those situations where you've kind of like, because it affects both sides equally, just having less of something can actually be better than having more of something, in terms of like, I know it's such a cliche to be like, oh, it separates the good from the great ones because it's just worse. But in this case, because we're talking about vision scarcity here, so if vision is a more scarce resource, it matters more what you do with it, and so it allows for teams to make better use of it rather than just be like, say if you've got, let's take some really extreme examples. So say in theory, if you could deploy 100 wards from your team, you could smother the whole map in it and you would never be caught off guard by anything. Like, inherently that's going to be less skillful than if you have one ward total between your whole team and you need to choose exactly where it needs to go, because there's much more scarcity. This is probably a really bad example, but hopefully that illustrates the idea.
Yeah, I get the idea, Peter. I think that's a fine example. But let's move on to turret plating.
Yes.
Yes. So turret plating. Outer turrets have extra resistances early on, but gold or grant gold for each 1,000 health they lose. So basically, outer turrets, they begin the game with 5 temporary plates, which grants them 5,000 health in total, right?
Well, what you'll see in game is that the health bars of turrets are divided up into segments.
Okay. So it's not called that they have like 5,000 total health.
Well, they do.
Yeah.
But it's very distinct from the player's point of view what that looks like. Like initially, I think people thought that maybe you just kind of like, you wouldn't have a health bar or something, and you just have to kind of guess. But it's actually relatively well communicated what a turret is and when you're going to take it and that kind of.
Yeah, but the change is that a turret plating grants 40 armor and magic resistance at the game start. Whenever you kill a plate, you get 160 gold divided among the champions close to the turret. And then 20 seconds after you've destroyed a plate, the turret gains extra armor and magic resistance, and then that can stack if you kill multiple plates in a span of 20 seconds.
Yes, so just to expand a little bit on what the intention behind this systemic change is, and that's a good word. I recommend using it as much as possible. Uh, I think it kind of feels like a big thing here that they're trying to stop is the idea of just, again, we've seen this loads of times in competitive, that you just bring your whole team, dogpile a particular lane, and smash down the tower to get first tower goal.
Yeah.
Like, this specifically means that before the 14-minute mark, that's a lot harder. Because, yeah, you take one plate, you get some gold and things, so that's rewarding in of itself. We can come back to it in a minute, but the magic and you get more armor and magic resist for a little bit when the plate breaks, because they've broken up the patch notes here to plate breaking and bulwark, which is a little bit confusing, but at least my understanding is that if you did bring your team to smash the turret, so you take down the first one, that's all fairly normal, what you could expect before, but now it's got a kind of anti-grouping mechanism in it, which means it's going to, for each other enemy champion there is apart from one, it's going to start stacking up extra armor and magic that's making it that much less efficient. Also, if you take down more than one segment, so for each 1,000 damage you are doing to that turret, it's getting harder and harder to do the next 1,000 damage. So I guess it becomes less efficient. I don't know, it might still be worthwhile, but I don't know how dramatic it is when you start, adding on 20, so say like 50 armor and magic resist to the tower. Like, I don't know what you think, Jesper, as far as
I liked it. I liked the change overall, that it forces you to. Well, force might be a bad word. That you still get gold from being dominant in lane. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that change. I think that I'm going to be very hesitant on saying whether or not I like the bulwark change, because I think that it's good that it has extra armor and magic resist, because it shouldn't be too easy to take towers early on. But it might make it too hard on snowballing a bit, which I'm not the biggest fan on. But obviously it's only 25 armor and magic resist, so I'll have to wait and see.
You're right that it does heavily reward. From what I've seen, it heavily rewards being able to dominate the lane early on. It doesn't take very much work.
But then again, like if you stack multiple people in a lane, let's say you see the enemy jungler gank the top side, then you say we're gonna go for the bottom lane tower. I like that you still get gold off of investing just a bit of time down there instead of taking the entire tower.
Yeah.
But I think it might be a bit hurtful that you can't get multiple, or you can't get the entire tower, because it always feels nice to have extra ground to work with.
Sure.
So I liked the plates, but I think 5 plates might be a bit too much. Maybe 4 or 3 plates might have been better. And I'm also looking forward to seeing how this works with the Rift Herald, because she does 1,500 base health or 40% max damage of the tower. So like, does the fact that she can charge and take 1,500 health, does that take away 1.5 plate, or does it not count towards that? Yeah, it should be, right? But it just makes it a bit counterintuitive to take the Rift Herald early on, because why would you want to take the Rift Herald unless you invest a lot of time into getting the Rift Herald, and essentially all you get out of it is removing 1 plate from tower.
Well, just to cover a couple of extra points there, so the amount of gold you get from taking down a plate is I believe it's roughly the same as a minion wave.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of if you're shoving somebody out of lane, then you potentially get an extra minion wave on them anyway, and then you get a second minion wave on them by taking out one of the plates, and it doesn't take that long to do 1,000 damage to a turret if you're not being interrupted by anything. So I think touch on the early game AD carry thing. Like I think that's really super for that. But you're right with the Herald. Yeah, you've only got the 4 minutes to work with, assuming you take it immediately. I do think you're probably right that, given that it then becomes much more resistant to further damage from the Herald, that I don't know. Like, I think people might still go for it, but it's X amount less effective.
And it just feels like less of an interesting investment because you can't get the plating gold afterwards, or sorry, after 14 minutes.
Yes,
so like
it disappears.
Yeah, so it's either you get what, like 160 gold plus X amount, or you wait and essentially get a tower.
I mean, I suppose at the same time it does give you some straight gold if you invest the Rift Herald into smashing through a turret, even if it wouldn't necessarily do as much damage as it might have done otherwise. Though to be fair, at the same time, assuming that you can keep the Rift Herald high on health, because I know that recently, the recent changes to Rift Herald meant that as long as it's alive when it charges, it almost doesn't matter because it's just doing so much base damage anyway. But now the towers have got, I don't know quite, I'm trying to remember what let's see. Well, so a quick check of what towers' health used to be. I can't remember offhand.
380. Oh, sorry, no, 3,800.
Okay, so yes, if you keep the Rift Herald at high health, it's going to do more damage because the whole Bulwark thing won't come in until it's taken that first bit of damage anyway.
Yeah.
So if you assume that Rift Herald does most of its damage in its initial charge anyway, then I don't think that's going to matter too much in terms of like you still get that same chunk of damage as long as they don't manage to hit it and like take off enough of its health to put it to base damage. Then I think you'd be doing.
I think the damage it does. So looking at League of Legends Wikia, the leap attack, she winds up for a few seconds and leaps into melee range. It's 40% of Herald's current health. Okay.
Yeah, it's that or
or base damage. Yeah.
Yeah, they put in the base damage thing, I think, to make it less useless. Because before that change, if the Rift Herald got hit on its eye on the back, it was basically just useless at that point. But now I always get annoyed when teams don't protect the Herald into a second tower, even when it's on low health. I think they're used to the idea that it doesn't do anything if it's low health. But that's definitely not the case anymore. If you can just get it to charge off, then yeah, you're looking at the 1,500 damage for just the case of taking a slight risk of at least posturing enough to get them to back off the Herald enough to get it to at least get the charge off.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to turret adjustments. So outer turret's health increased and resistance is removed basically by plating. And all turret damage AD scalings has been increased, and then first turret bonus has been reduced. Basically, the first brick has been reduced to accommodate the turret plating gold, and then besides that, all of the other towers have gone up in effectiveness.
Yeah, I mean we're looking at a doubling of the AD scaling on the tower, so tower diving suddenly becomes. I don't know if it makes it
I think it makes it more effective because the AD scaling is going up 9 per minute now, and basically you're not going to be looking at taking an inner turret or an inhibitor turret at 20 minutes anymore, unless you scale very heavily.
Well,
So
I mean, outer turrets start with 152 AD, so I'm trying to figure out what the proportional increase that is. Let's try and figure out how actually more dangerous that will be over time, and I might not be able to use calculator to figure out. And so in terms of by the end of the game, it ends up at, let's say for the sake of calculation, it ends up at 300. It's 278, but it's gonna be a lot easier to calculate if it's 300.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure. Oh yeah, it's on the patch. Sorry. I guess. Sorry, what I was trying to get at here is I don't think it's twice as dangerous to tower dive because that presupposes that it starts with 0 AD and it's going up by twice as much as it used to. While it is going up by twice as much as it used to, it's still only a proportion of its total AD, which starts off at 150 anyway. So I think it discourages tower diving, but I don't think it's like
It definitely makes it
instantly
harder.
die.
It definitely makes it harder and more riskful to go for tower dives. Especially on like the further in you get to the base, the harder it's going to be. And also in the early game, like the outer turrets are so dangerous to tower dive now.
Yes, well, it's.
Actually. Oh, sorry. You go.
I was gonna say you're right. I didn't actually notice that the inner turrets and inhibitor turrets have got a higher AD scaling.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. That earlier on you have a lot less health to play with, so that's gonna be. While the outer turrets have got less time to scale,
Mm-hmm.
Than the inner turrets would do. I think you're right that it's we see a lot of tower diving really around the tier 1s more than anything. Like I kind of feel like tier 2s and things, even if they've got a bit more AD, so we're talking like 50 more by.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, maybe that's significant. So the actual numbers they give here is at the 18-minute mark. So we see the outer towers have gone down.
Yeah.
So inner turrets are now reaching their AD cap a lot sooner. So they used to take up nearly 30 minutes before inner turrets did as much damage as they were ever going to do. Sorry, it used to take nearly half an hour. Now it takes 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So they're doing a lot more damage a lot earlier. So maybe that tier 2 turrets won't be as much of a given.
I have a point to add on to that. Actually, I have 2 points first of all. Global goal being changed. Again, it ties into the idea that they have overall that snowballing should be more risky and shouldn't be as effective. And now you talked a lot about the AD caps. I saw Matt Magical, one of our colleagues, over on Twitter, tweet about how he thinks supports are going to build Ohmwrecker as the first item now.
I think he's wrong.
You think he's wrong?
I'm almost certain that he's wrong. I love Bad Magic with all my heart.
But it does make sense if you think about it. It could be an effective
to do so.
Yes, it could be an effective strategy.
I still don't think it's going to be a good enough item, but I mean I get what you're saying in terms of like it's definitely riskier. I don't think this is I have no real metric to base this on, but I don't think this is going to be. As I was saying, I don't know if this is actually that big of a change. I feel like it looks a lot bigger than it is because, again, you look at AD scaling, it's like, it's more than doubled. AD is more than doubled, which is not the case. Because it's a very small proportion of its overall AD, at least in the early going.
Okay.
So, you'd be taking like, 20 more damage from each shot or something? Well, maybe more than that. Like, maybe 30, but...
Yeah. Not a lot. Overall.
I don't think we're in Ohmwrecker territory. I'd love for that to be true because honestly, I want Mad Magic to be right about everything he says. But I think while he's right, there's more incentive. I don't think the Ohmwrecker is a rewarding enough item for it to be. But I hope I'm wrong.
Okay, well let's jump to minions. So basically, minion health, AD, and movement speed scaling increased, and cannon minions spawn faster early. Cannon minions spawn faster earlier in the game. That was quite a mouthful. So global minion changes. They now reach their max values at 37 minutes. They deal less damage to turrets and less damage to champions. And they move faster.
Yeah, they move a lot faster.
Yeah.
So like
that's gone up by 300%.
Yeah, like. That's pretty crazy that your minions are going to be barreling down the lane at like 75 more movement speed than they used to be. So you're not going to be waiting for a minion wave anywhere near as long.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the future changes as well, like so the melee minions are going. They've got more health, they've got more armor, they've got more AD. There are some changes which kind of counteract this to an extent, but it means that I think before you were super reliant on Baron buff to get anywhere near the base, but now they last a bit longer. There's also more. If we go even further down, there's cannons come in 5 minutes earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and they also start coming in every wave 10 minutes earlier. So yeah, like I think just minions overall are becoming more resilient and more present because they're not
Yeah.
just like sitting in lane.
It also gives a bit more gold to a snowballing team because suddenly you have more cannon minions. So that's a bit more gold that they can play around with. It's not a significant amount, but it's definitely a bit.
Yeah.
I like the changes to the super minions in terms of the attack speed. That now they have a higher attack speed, but less base AD. So like it feels more of like a threat in terms of the way it looks more than the way it actually hits.
Well, something else you'll be definitely everyone will be noticing is these little spots on the map, which are the super minions who
Showing up. Yeah,
I think that's a really good change. Like it's because I think it's very easy for particularly for lower ranked teams to miss something like that. But now, because I don't feel like that should ever. I think as at least where my stance is that any information which should be obvious to a experienced player should not be hidden from a newer player. So, like a more experienced player is never going to be like, "Oh boy, there's super minions in my base. I didn't know this was happening, and now I'm lost." But a newer player, absolutely. Like if you're focusing on team fights and things, you can just be like, "Oh crap, I didn't realize that was a thing." And now that people might describe it as a skill gap. I personally find those kind of skill gaps I don't like because I think it's just punishing players for being newer at the game, and I don't think you should be trying to do that if you want people to play your game. So yeah, I think that's a really good change.
Yep. Well, let's jump on to epic monster respawn time. So basically, elemental drakes they spawn 1 minute faster. Elder drake respawn 2 minutes faster, and then Baron Nashor respawns 1 minute faster.
Yeah. This kind of has to be taken with the elemental drake change below as well, because there's a couple of things at play here. So yeah, I love seeing the dragon and baron have the same respawn, like in terms of trying to equalize their importance as objectives. It always felt a little bit strange that like they'd have different respawns for each other, even though they're much closer in terms of importance. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, if we talk about the elemental drake thing below as well, if we take that into account as well, I'm happy to see a lot of the global gold go back into the drake, because I was a big fan of back in season 3 and 4 where you had gold coming from the drake. So I wasn't a fan of it being a strictly gold objective. That felt boring, but I like having global gold come out of it. I like that it's spawning a bit later. Again, this is them trying to counteract, like snowballing, and I like that idea that it might spawn later, but you get more gold off of it, and it spawns fast or respawns faster. You also get more experience out of it, and then the buffs that you get from it helps you snowball easier of the first one, but it's still the same the more drakes you get. So like it's stronger to have 1 and 2, but you still get the same amount off of 3.
Yeah, I mean, speaking as a filthy Warwick main, I'm a little sad that I can't cheese an early Drake in the first couple of minutes, because you could literally get that. You could go, I think you could go blue buff 1 camp and then straight to Jake, and then actually still get it. But yeah, now I mean, this is some of the stuff I picked up from watching LS's patch analysis. Now it's worth the same amount of gold as a camp, and also doubling up on the XP early on. It feels like if they didn't push the timer to be a lot later, then I think you'd be kind of back to the bad old days of older League of Legends where the entire teams would gather around the Dragon Pit before it spawned, and every game started with a team fight at level 1 because the Drake was so valuable.
Yeah. I think I think that's a good point. Really good point. Also, I like the point you made earlier on about the Elder Drake and Baron Nashor feeling as important now, because it obviously should be that. It's the late game buffs, and if they don't feel important, then kind of what does? So like,
Mm.
well, so having the same respawn time does put it more like as a, do I want fighting power or do I want pushing power? Essentially.
Yeah. I think that was going to significantly change what games feel like for us to cast and watch and and play, because it's also doubly important for the Elder Dragon because of course they put in the changes, which means that if you get a second Elder Dragon,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot better than the first, and now you're going to be potentially seeing that 4 minutes earlier than you would have otherwise, assuming that everyone's taking everything on respawn.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I feel like that's we'll be seeing more doubling up of drakes, and that's going to help actually close out the games a bit sooner, which I think is probably a good.
Yeah. Well, it's all a way of like finding a balance between hitting snowballing too hard and then finding ways of giving back to the players, which these elemental drakes will help. It will help snowball, and like especially Infernal Drake and Mountain Drake will definitely help you take towers down faster. But
Oh,
sorry,
it's.
yeah.
I was just going to say to your point about snowballing. Uh, One of the reasons why I like this kind of stuff as well is that because the epic monsters are something that the other team can fight you for,
Mm-hmm.
whereas there are some advantages which are kind of like I'm struggling to think of a good example, but it's just like it's given that these objectives are now up, as a team that's behind you could potentially at least try. If the game revolves more around epic monsters, those are an opportunity for a team that are behind to potentially use the epic monster as a sixth team member to
Mm-hmm.
fight the opposing team, because they're splitting their attention, and so it means that there's more opportunities for either the team that are ahead to turn back from that objective and kill the opposing team, therefore cleaning up the game a bit faster, or for the team who are losing, it gives them more chances to take a fight on more even.
Okay, well, let's jump to Jumble Camp experience. So, camp monsters experienced unchanged early and now reduced late. Uh, they still give you the same value from level 1 to 7. Uh, right?
Oh no, sorry. So
Oh
that's
no.
where
Wait.
these are the values for 1 to 7.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. So basically, after level 7, they're less effective, right?
I have to look up. I should have had these numbers ready. I know Freak has got Freak's patch run and has generally got some good actual stats, but from my understanding, this means that if you clear the jungle really quickly, you've got less of an XP lead than you would otherwise.
Yeah.
Uh, and I guess it means that slower clearing junglers have more of a chance to not get vastly outpaced and become irrelevant.
Yeah. Also, a way for you to get an incentive to go out and fight, because that's now also a way of getting experience. Plus, the Drake gives you more experience now, and epic monsters are up faster.
Well, we know from watching a lot of games that junglers are tending to be the difference makers for teams.
Mm-hmm.
So I think anything that kind of takes a little bit of power away from them in general is probably a good thing, just because it seems to be fairly ubiquitous that the jungler is the most important or most consistently difference-making player.
Yeah. Well, let's jump to runes, because I wouldn't say that I'm running out of time, but I do have to go in like 19 minutes.
So you are running out of time. Okay.
Yes, and we've been going for over an hour now as well.
Are we?
Yes.
My, the time flies.
So let's talk about runes. So rune path bonus is removed, and now you have to select one stat from each of 3 rows before each game. So basically, you can choose between getting more damage, more attack speed, more cooldown, health, or resistances.
Yes, so it's like bringing back the old runes to an extent.
Yeah.
I'm a really big fan of this because it's going to give us something else to talk about as casters, because we can hover over someone's stats and be like, they've got to make more of a decision coming into the game what they're going to prioritize. So, they've because row 2 and row 3 have both got the same options for armor and magic resist.
Yeah.
Someone has a very distinctive choice. They're telegraphing: are you playing more defensively, or are you going to try and, punch through damage early on? Which I think it's nice to have that choice rather than just having it given to you and be like. And also, it means that you've got a lot of paths opened up which weren't there before. Like, you've got the AP casters who can now take precision without being like, I've got a bunch of useless attack speed that I don't really need.
Yeah. Well, as long as we're able to see it in game in some way, like, as long as it can be shown other than us having to click on the players, then I think it would be good for us.
Probably will be.
Yeah. It probably will be, but it would be nice to have like some other way of seeing it.
Well, I was talking to people yesterday. They were suggesting that something which would be kind of nice to have would be like a kind of a pop-out panel for champions. A toggleable panel that showed in the same way that at the moment, if you're playing a game, you've got a panel for runes, which tells you a bunch of information about runes. I don't believe that's available for spectators currently.
No.
And if it was, then you could also have that, that page not only lets you see how effective someone's runes have been, but it also just tells you what they are in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now there's more stuff at play. I think it would be great if that was a thing, but I don't know if it's going to happen for a while at least.
Most likely not. They are still yet to fix their spectator client, so...
Shh, it's a secret.
I wouldn't doubt, or I wouldn't count on it. Anyways, fleet footwork. AP ratio decreased. Basically, we've not seen a lot of AP mid laners go for that. It has been if you needed a bit more health, so that was like Twisted Fate and Castin that went for that. And now they're just reverting it back because I think they still want AP mid laners to focus primarily on going into the AP tree. And now you can still like get adaptive force off of the rune rows or rune stats. Yeah.
I did see some people going for kind of kooky things with. I know that Cassidin certainly was potentially quite strong with that. I think that might be something of a reaction to kind of edge case stuff. But yeah, since we're short on time, I guess it's just not going to probably be seen so much.
Yeah. Well, let's talk more about Celerity and Dark Harvest then. So Celerity has been changed so that instead of having a flat movement speed increase and damage off of that, you now get movement speed bonuses increased by 8%. And I think you still get damage off the movement speed bonus. Oh wait, no, you don't. You don't get damage anymore. So you just get a movement speed bonus increased by 8%. Basically, Rammus and Nunu, and probably Hecarim, could like this rune because it would give them more ganking power because they rely a lot on movement speed.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, they're definitely the obvious choices. I've had a look on Reddit today, and apparently, I think this might be a bug, but it says that it doesn't work off boots. Or at least it says it somewhere, but apparently it does.
I think it ought to be, or to do.
Yeah, I can't remember. It's not. I actually can't see this in the patch notes, so maybe I'm just making this up. But yeah, I think there's. I certainly came across a Jin yesterday who made pretty good use of it. I think if you can start stacking up, and particularly on people who've got large movement speed increases, like Hecarim, Warwick, anyone else like that, because it's only increasing the movement speed bonus. It's not your move like the old one used to increase your movement speed by 1.5%. So it's more generally applicable.
But now it's just bonuses, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just bonuses. So I think there probably are going to be some abuse cases for this, or at least some very strong cases. But I suspect that for a lot of people, it's not going to be a priority if it was before anyway.
Well, Dark Harvest instead. I know you have some thoughts on that.
Oh yeah, this is something that's quite difficult to read on first blush. So it's the big thing is for the very last note, minions and monsters no longer grant souls. So you stack up Dark Harvest now. I think it's much more a laning thing. If you hit someone who's below 50% health, you will get a soul back. but it's got a long cooldown, 45 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
In other respects, it's kind of similar. It has been hot fixed as of today to do less damage because I tried it out myself yesterday and I was like, oh boy, this does a lot of damage even if I'm doing a crap job of harvesting souls. So I think it's maybe a little bit more balanced now. But the big thing is to note also, the two most important things about it are right at the bottom of the patch notes. That it resets to 1.5 seconds on champion takedowns. So if you've got a reset champion, as long as you can wait 1.5 seconds, you can proc it multiple times in the fight, and it's a lot of damage.
Mm-hmm. So that's like, imagine a Katarina or Pantheon or Irelia would be good at doing this, basically. But yes, it is a strong ability that has been hotfixed. Do you mind if we jump onto the next one? Or do you have more to add? Okay, so, yeah?
Oh, one very small thing is that the Dark Harvest used to proc on basic attacks, and now it does any damage, so it's a lot more widely applicable. Okay. Anyway.
Ravenous Hunter, I'm happy to see that being changed a bit, because it was getting abused in Korean solo queue by Pantheon, because you would just heal so much off of it. So it's not.
I suspect it would still be good.
Yeah, it's not guarded at all. It's still good, but it's less effective.
I know LS isn't a big fan of this, but I think he might be missing some of the edge cases which you're talking.
Yeah, he might be. Demolish or Shield Bash?
Demolish, it has been more or less, has been straight nerf.
Yeah.
But it's important to note that the turret, as they say in the note themselves, turret plating is much more rewarding. So I think it's probably still very good, because you get, even if you're doing less damage, you're getting a more of a reward for that damage anyway.
Yeah, and 30% max health. Also, like I think it's good to nerf it because it's just too effective for tanks to go in and damage the tower with that, without actually auto hitting it.
Yeah, well, I mean, now it's got a slightly shorter charge up time. It's going to be easier to just like be next to a turret with somebody. As in, if you push someone to turret, you can then charge up outside the turret range and walk in and hit it a little bit faster. And again, with the turret plating worth more gold, you're much more incentivized to do that.
Yeah. Shield Bash. You gain bonus resistances while shielded. Your next basic attack after gaining a shield deals bonus damage. We've talked a bit about this, how it could be very effective on Mordekaiser or Scion, because basically these guys, they focus on having a shield, and they love to auto-attack. And it's quite a lot of damage, considering that it's from a minor rune that you actually get off having a shield and bonus health.
Well, initial testing suggests it looks to be, I think under normal circumstances, about 10 extra damage or so in that kind of ballpark area. So it's definitely present, and I think later on in the game it's gonna be.
It's quote unquote a strong ability, but it's 3 damage off of just having a shield. So it's 3 damage from being safe.
Yeah, it's worth noting that so if you're an AD carry, you can take this if you're playing with someone who gives you shields, like Janna or something, and then suddenly it's pretty rewarding in that instance. There's also some weird cases with, like we were talking about the celerity before, on certain champions it's very, very good. Watley on the X player on Twitter was talking about, he's a big Tam Kench guy, and because Tam Kench could potentially a massive shield with his grey health, it's potentially a bonus to him, and that for someone like Mordekaiser or Malphite, someone who's kind of got a shield a lot of the time, you get this bonus at armor and magic resist, so it feels like quite an efficient mastery, especially if you're if you're with a support you can rely on to be shielding you all the time.
Yep. Well, bone plating, damage block increased but duration decreased, and move to row 2. Yeah, I think it is a fine change. I didn't see too much of it, but I like that the buffer duration has been changed, then you still get the block amount. So that it's not actually too bad, but you still have that effectiveness in it.
Yeah, I mean, as I said in the notes, it's now much more directly anti-burst, whereas I think a lot of people were just taking it because it was just generally good.
Yeah.
Um,
Chrysalis has been removed, so probably not
mhm.
talk too much about that. Let's go to Overgrowth. That is an updated ability. It now the stacks now grant flat health rather than percentage health, and 100 and at 120 minion and monster deaths gain a percentage health bonus.
Yeah, it was. As someone who's played a fair chunk of Cyan,
Hmm.
you would barely be getting anything from Overgrowth in the early going, and now at least you get something.
Yeah.
And then later on, you kind of end up more or less where you started before, which is that you've got a set max health bonus. So I feel I think that's probably a small buff to it, uh, at least in terms of it actually doing anything.
I think it's definitely a buff to it, and for some champions, it's going to be a massive buff. Like, if we take Sample again, for an example, that guy already stacks health with his W, so now he gets even more health from this, and then get that extra additional 2.5 max health. So that's suddenly a lot of health this guy has.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll have to see if we're maybe missing anything there, but yeah, given if you see what the old scaling is, 0.2% max health,
Mm.
like, I mean, that's what. So you're looking at after five, well, maybe 5, 6 waves or so, you get 1% max health. So, and that, I think now, if memory serves, I don't think that was very much at all. So yeah, I don't think it's like a big buff, but I think it's hopefully a little bit more though.
Yeah. And then Kleptomancy has also been changed, so it now procs off the next two basic attacks after using an ability rather than just the first, and you no longer get wards after 20 minutes. So
I think this might be really strong.
I think it's going to be way stronger because now you will always get 5 gold. I think off of every basic attack maybe, or something nicer. Plus, well, wards kind of feel bad, but that's basically because they changed the trinket, right, and the pink ward. But I think getting 2 basic attacks giving you something is going to be super strong.
Yes, so that's something that's quite easy to miss at the bottom. The drop rates have been decreased because I think there's an expectation now that you're going to have to go in and get both procs. Initially, you look at this, you're like, Kleptomans, he's just twice as good, which it sort of is, but you're getting less items. So I think if you can't maintain, that 2 auto attack tray, which I still think that if Ezreal's using this, like, he's not getting full value off of just poking you with his spells, but I'm not sure it's exactly hard for him to go in and follow that up with an auto attack anyway. So I think it might just be better most cases.
I think it's all just better. At least for most people, it shouldn't be hard to follow that up with an auto attack. Maybe for like someone like, let's say, Gangplank, it's going to be hard to follow that up with an auto attack.
Yes.
So it's much more of, you want shiny items, you have to fight for it, kind of keystone.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think that's definitely going to affect Gangplank pretty badly. If we make the assumption, and I don't know if this is true because I wish some patch notes went into more detail, but if we assume that you get, say, half as many items as you would otherwise, to account for the fact that it's now split up into 2 procs, then, yeah, if with Gangplank, you were getting the full power of the Kleptomance, now you're only getting half of it, unless you go up and trade, which you probably don't want to be doing, because it's much more risky.
Yeah.
So I think that would be a fairly significant enough. But anyway,
bounties, counterfeits.
Yes,
That
is pretty big.
That has been changed massively. So, they increase at after 4 kills, and now minion and monster goal advantages now factor into bounties. Bounties on the losing team has also been reduced, and bounty payout per kill has now been capped. But it's a gigantic change because now you give a lot more gold over to the opponent if you die after being very far ahead, because CS advantages also factor in.
Yeah, I think this is a really good change. So again, what this patch is looking to try and do is to end games sooner, but it's not necessarily just looking to end games sooner in favor of the person who's winning. So you've got the ability to now get these massive bounty payouts.
Mm-hmm.
I like that they go up fast, and I like that if someone who's really far ahead on farm, which is I think I've seen this before in games where you'll have someone with a big bounty, even if they've got a relatively even lane against someone else. So like, say if your top laner is getting smashed in CS, like at least you've got some kind of recourse to try and recover that by killing the opposing top lane. I think that's great. The bounty's not increasing mid combat is interesting. I'm not sure quite how that's going to come in, if what that sort of means overall. But also that you don't get big bounties. Say if you're on a losing team, but one of your players is doing well, then that person's no longer a liability. Because if they get killed, then it's like, well, now we're just completely boned because we've just given across enough gold to the opposing team to help finish off all of their items.
Yeah. It's definitely a big change in the fact that, as you said, people can now make a bigger comeback. And also the additional kills gold, the 100 extra gold you can get from the bounties. Like, you could potentially end up giving, 800 to 1,000 gold over to your opponents. That's a lot of gold.
That spills over to future kills as well.
Yeah. And I like sorry, you go.
I was going to say, in the games where I get smashed, which are
every game
not that infrequent, you literally see someone who's worth 1,000 gold. Like if they're ludicrously far ahead, they will be worth 1,000 gold. You kill them and they'll still be worth 1,000 gold. And like if you can leverage that and actually get those kills, and suddenly you've got such a big catch-up mechanic.
But I like the change about the increased mid combat. Again, I like that when you are ahead, you can stay ahead and you have an incentive to continue to be ahead. That's why I'm opposed to the trinket changes. But I like the that the bounties no longer increase mid combat, because I think being ahead should also come at a risk. And now if you win a team fight, let's say you have 5 kills, so that's 500 gold. You are in a team fight and you kill 4 people, or even let's say you kill 4 people and then you die. So you give over 500 gold, and then you're still worth 400 gold next team fight. I think that's a very good change, because it gives even more incentive to the losing team to look for picks and look for kills.
Yeah, I think anything that pushes people towards situations that actually get them back into the game is going to be a good thing.
Yeah. Well, also talking about gold, minimum kill gold had also been changed. So minimum gold granted for killing an enemy with 6+ deaths has been increased.
Yes.
Basically, so it's not a lot.
Strategically minded Scion. This is directed specifically at that, and also, I guess to a lesser extent, proxy Singe. But I mean, I feel like this is their answer. This is them saying, this isn't going to be anywhere near as valid a strategy as it once was.
Yeah, you're still going to give over gold. It's a good change, because you should be punished for dying a lot. You shouldn't be. Let's just put it that way. You should be punished by dying a lot. And now you're gonna get punished by dying a lot.
I think this does lack a little bit of nuance on Riot's part, in terms of this. This does punish somebody who's having a rubbish game.
Yeah.
Very hard. But this is the relatively broad strokes applied to try and stop the tactically minded Scion from doing it. I think if they spent a little bit more time on it, they might have put in something to reflect. Well, I mean, I suppose this is maybe true anyway. Which is that that the tactical Scion would be earning gold, and therefore presents a little bit of a different player profile than the player who's just getting dumpstered. But anyway, the fact that it stops this, I think, is probably a good thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, like with the tactical Scion, you also do earn CS. So if you earn a lot of CS, then you also will be worth more.
That's true.
Obviously, if you die a lot, let's say tactical Scion dies 10 times, you still have to earn 250 gold than the enemy team's average, so it's probably not going to come in effect. But just that the mechanic is there does mean that if you screw too much around, you're still gonna get punished.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's gonna add a little bit on there.
Yeah. Well, summoner spells looks to be somewhat of the last thing. So teleport. Channel time has been reduced and it can no longer be cancelled.
Oh boy, oh
so,
boy.
So that means that whenever I'm playing with Counterfeit, he's going to suicide a lot more.
I think this feels like a really big change. Like, I mean, I don't think the channel duration is particularly. I know it was changed up a while back and now being changed back down again, but not being able to cancel it. Like, I mean, we've seen this in a lot of games where a person will teleport in and we're like, why did they complete that teleport? The situation changed during the 4 seconds of channel time to be like a really terrible idea, and now that's going to be happening a lot more. I wonder if we might just see people not taking it anymore because of how risky it can be compared to, the surety you get with something like a knight in the top line of being like, at least this isn't going to actively sabotage me.
You know what? I think that for like the first few weeks of preseason, we might see a lot of ignites. But I think for competitive, just the tempo advantage you can still get off that teleport and the presence you can have in the later stages of the game, it's still going to be a good thing.
Yeah.
At least more than ignite, because ignite kind of just favors your laning phase and your split pushes.
I think it's a good change in that it makes it more of a significant choice opposed to. I mean, you could maybe argue that it reduces the skill expression with it in terms of you don't have that option. But I feel like maybe struggle a little bit with how to deal with teleport, and this is a bit of a blunt force being applied here to be like, we don't like this particular user, so we're just going to take it away.
Yeah.
Which they've done with a few other things, where it's like, if they don't like a mechanic, they're just gonna like hammer it out of existence, which I guess is okay, but
yeah, in some senses, I guess it is. But yeah, I also think that that it's definitely going to be a harder ability to use, but I still think it's going to be used because just the tempo advantage you can get and the presence on the map is going to make a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what that's going to look like, but I suspect that it's going to require more coordination from a team to be like, you're going to have that little bit more hesitation to use it because you have to read it properly.
It's also going to be probably more of a proactive ability than a reactive ability than that it's been used as of lately.
Yeah. Well, I certainly think like teleporting behind someone's team is going to be a lot more risky. Just because, by the time you're there, if the opposing team sort of read what's happening and just rush forward and murder your team, then suddenly you're like, oh,
or rush backwards to kill you.
Yeah, I think you could argue that it's kind of like more skillful that it's a riskier thing to use, I suppose.
Yeah, I think you're right, but Mr. Hartnell, that means we're through the patch notes. So with that being said, I also have to go. I have work. So thank you for joining me today. It was really educational having you here, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, man. No, it's a really good patch, I think.
Yeah, it's a great patch.
Been fun. Talk at extreme length, and if anyone's actually made it all the way to the end, I salute you.
But guys, obviously follow us on social medias. You can find me on Twitter, same with Peter at Daedalus casts and Counterfeit casts, respectively. We're also both on Instagram. I actually upload stuff. Peter uploads cat pictures. So if you're into that kind of stuff, go find him on Instagram. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.